Someone went up and pushed the cage. Then the bobcat walked out, turned around, made eye contact with almost every single one of us, and then started making its way towards us. We found out it had rabies. Its back legs were not working. So it tried to crawl towards us, and it was going for murder.
Hello and welcome to Shoot the Shit, a podcast that tells the unfiltered tales of filmmakers' craziest production and on-set experiences.
Because every shit situation on set makes for a great story after. I'm Kristen, a director and editor.
And I'm Taylor, also a director and editor. And today our guest is James Calnan III, a filmmaker and photographer. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So James, you want to kind of dive in a little bit about sort of your background and what you do in the film world?
Yes. I started my film career about 6 years ago after I graduated from film school up in New Hampshire, and I am now Massachusetts-based. I've worked on a number of mostly reality television and a few select studio films and independent films.
Cool.
Very nice. So as far as we know you, we have heard that you have quite a few very interesting stories being, a filmmaker that works in so many different parts of the industry. So to start off, I would love to hear about a bobcat.
Bobcat, yes. At my time working on reality television, there were many crazy stories that ended up, interacted with wildlife, a few dead bodies per se. Like one of them, like a dead body was found in a truck after searching for this individual for almost 20 years, and found out it was a drunk driver situation, and it was just an incredibly sad thing. But when they found him, all that was left were his black bones inside the car. But they were able to put the cold case to rest after 20 years, and it was insane. But
that's all because the film crew just happened upon this truck and this body.
No, it was actually, we were following a mission with certain individuals, and they had a new piece of technology that could scan rivers and find things that are below surface level for the eyes that can't see, even for scuba divers. So they were able to put this little machine in, found it. They took out the truck in multiple parts because it had been there for so long, and then they recovered the body.
That's wild.
That's crazy.
It was a crazy time, and especially when, some producers are like, hey, go under the tow truck and try to take pictures and like go put you in kind of sketchy situations that I'm like, oh, that doesn't seem super safe, but it like no one was hurt though. So the only person that remained like that was dead was the body that they found.
Well, that's good.
So then this was on a reality show, right?
Yes, it was. Yes, a very long-standing reality show.
Did it have to do with true crime, or was that just kind of like a thing that happened amidst whatever you guys were doing?
Usually not. It doesn't usually have to do with true crime. It just has to do with local enforcement that ends up working certain cases, and we get called out to film whatever they're doing. And this was an A story for them. This was like a cold case that had haunted the department for a long time, and they were finally able to put it to rest after so many years. And the only major thing that was a very sad detail, besides the man that they found, was that the mother of this individual died 6 months before they found the body, and she was never able to find out what happened to her son. And that was so sad. It was a very sad fact, but it was just for the department itself. There was one individual that was working on that case. That was his first case that he worked on, and then as he was retiring, was able to finish the first case. At least from what I remember.
That's pretty cool. You got a little bit of closure.
Yeah. At least someone did. Jeez.
Yeah.
So much tragedy.
Okay, so there were some other crazy things that happened on this shoot, it sounds like.
Yes, many crazy things. My memory that really comes to mind is the bobcat, the famous bobcat, which you probably can find somewhere, where in the world of this TV show, they would find animals that were hurt either from accidents, other animals, and they would take in the animal, rehabilitate it, give it surgery, make sure it was all healed up, and then they would just release it into the wild. And for many people that don't know, Wild animals especially, they are terrified of humans. They want nothing to do with us. And so when we release them, they just fly out of the cage into the forest, never to be seen again. And that's 99%. That's how it goes. We found a bobcat with it fought a porcupine and lost because a porcupine is probably the number one thing that will always want to fight because of its quills. So they found the bobcat with a face full of quills, gave it surgery, took it all out. Then the next day, we're like, all right, let's go release it. Let's go film it. We set up cameras. I had a production stills camera just ready to go. And this thing woke up and it was really upset. Usually animals are not that upset about it. Like it's not like they're just scared. But this one kept growling. And so we had someone go over to the cage and just open it up. And the animal did not come out. And we were just really puzzled. We all just looked at each other. We're like, is this thing actually in there? And so someone went up and pushed it, like pushed the cage. Then the bobcat walked out, turned around, made eye contact with almost every single one of us, and then started making its way towards us. But it's because we found out it had rabies. Its back legs were not working. So it tried to crawl towards us, and it was going for murder. It was not a safe situation. We all backed up, and the officer that was there put two bullets in it and put it to rest right then and there. And it was one of those. I had a production stills camera, and after looking at the production stills, it looked right down the barrel of my lens, and it went for the smallest individual, which I was not. But it was one of those moments where you take stock and you thought like, wow, is this it? You know, because especially if you get hit with rabies, it has 100% kill rate. Like if you don't get it treated, you will die. And that was one of my first few years as a freelance filmmaker.
Oh my God. The adrenaline had to be pumping in the moment. Like I can't even imagine.
Oh, I couldn't even hear anybody. My heart was pumping into my chest, into my ears. Like it was, and especially when, this very brave individual got its attention and went and, and pulled it over, then just, yeah. And like put it to an end right then and there. It also, like the way it happened within 20 seconds. It was so quick, but because when your blood is pumping that fast, it just felt like it was a lifetime. And after it all happened, we were like, we spent 3 days on this story. It was a done deal. It was like the easiest thing in the world because we released tons of animals. Nothing has ever happened like this, but we just didn't know it had rabies until later because sometimes it takes a little while for rabies to spread with it, like just like within the bodies of wild animals or anybody that it's affected.
That's really sad. So you guys worked to rehabilitate it, had this whole story around it, and in the end ended up having to be shot.
Yeah, it was very sad because even though with the show it has to do with around it has to do with like hunters and and the hunting of animals, but it's about conservation. It's about animals being able to live their full life until it is their time. And unfortunately, this animal came to a very bitter end, and it was very emotional. It was very emotional afterwards because again, we spent 72 hours with this animal. That's all we were kind of obsessed about, is making sure we got a great story and release this animal to the wild safe and sound. And then you just don't expect this thing to turn around and try to kill you.
Oh my God.
It's very odd. It's a very odd situation. You would never think you're in it.
Did the animal make it into the show?
It did. At first, they didn't think it would be a good idea because the show is more about, now, even though it's a lot of drama about, crazy missions that they go on, this was an educational piece to the public about if you see an animal that is going to attack you, it most likely has rabies because wild animals will do anything they can to avoid contact with human beings.
I didn't know that. Huh, interesting. So the rabies kind of makes them want to go.
Yeah, it makes them a zombie. It makes their judgment completely different, and it just turns them into something. It turns animals into something that you really only would see in a movie in a weird way. Like you would just think like, oh no, wild animals usually don't attack you unless they're provoked. And we didn't provoke this guy. Like he was just about to be sent out, and nope, turned around, and it was a fight or flight moment for sure.
Yeah, in most cases, I think wild animals like that are more defensive rather than offensive. So I guess that's a good rule of thumb is if they're offensive, it's probably rabies, and you're in more danger than you think you are. And rabies is a really weird, scary thing. It's so unpredictable, and as sad as it is that this bobcat had rabies, had it gone untreated, it probably would have had an even worse time. So, and unfortunately, ending its life very quickly was probably not what, the result that you wanted from this experience, but was probably a little bit better than, if it had just been left to its own devices,
Yeah,
being
it was
infected with
quick.
rabies.
I would say its death was swift and it was quick and it was as humane in the moment as you could probably give, but it was sad nonetheless.
Yeah, of course. Of
I can't
course.
imagine a day like that at work. Definitely never had anything like that happen. Knock on wood. So
And that being like what's like one of your kind of like first experiences being in the industry. You said it was kind of earlier on in your career, right?
Yes, as soon as I got out of college, I was able to work on a TV show, and it really is like a boot camp. I looked at it because you go in there made out of Jello, and I felt like I got out carved out of wood. Like nothing bothers me as much anymore, because of like, oh, it'll never be as crazy as it was before. So I can handle like, because I handled a few life or death situations, and yeah, and especially. Like another, I guess a very quick one about like, my first time actually filming for this show. I was able to be a cameraman, and it was like, oh, this was a big moment. And it was -10-degree weather. It was during the winter. It was insane. And then our first call was, hi, we have a situation about a man that's on a mountain that fell and cracked his skull on on the edge of a rock. And when they had to go get him, he was not going to be able to be driven to a hospital. It was so far away. They had to stop they had to shut down a highway, land a helicopter on the highway,
wow.
and airlift this individual. I was about 50 feet away from the helicopter as it landed and took this individual up. It was just, that's the type of show you work on, and it's I'm grateful to have worked on it. It was like one of those things that like, wow, I learned a lot of lessons. I learned how to handle a lot of different situations, but the stories you never forget.
I bet after those experiences, some of the things people freak out on sets, you're like, this is no big deal. I've seen worse.
Yeah, like no, that's a Tuesday.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, yeah, what a wild early career boot camp, as you say. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your early career and some of your college projects. It sounds like you had one that was maybe a bit of a shit show and didn't turn out as expected. Can you tell us a
Yes,
little bit about that?
yes, this one I call the Vietnam of my college career. It was by far probably the worst project I've ever been a part of. It was just fucking terrible in every way because the production behind it. We worked with children. Like as we worked with 6 kids was our main cast, and there's always the famous quote: "Never work with children or animals," and I've done both quite a bit. Um, the children were fine; like they were very professional people. They were really quite sweet. It was the production, well, one production individual it was one production individual, the director. She is by far today the worst person I've ever worked with. She threatened physical violence on her crew all the time, would just insult you in front of everybody, try to have a power trip. She had a Napoleon complex that like she had to look taller than you no matter what you did. And it just made for a horrific set. And like and we would film during winter, in a cabin, and like a little cabin that looked like it was built by kids. She would show up late all the time, never knew what she was doing, always treated people like shit, and it was like, and our teacher kind of let it happen a little bit too much, and I really wish that people we spoke up a little bit more. Like we tried to vote to have her ousted as the director because she was just so horrible to us. And like even one
You,
instance, like we're in one instance we were filming with the kids, and it took so long to set up the shot. The kids were getting cold, and so our cinematographer and we were like, they love Eminem, so they just started singing an Eminem song. We were like, Mom Spaghetti. And as we were they were having such a good time. And then in the middle of it, our director comes up and says, "Oh, you mean that rapper that beats women all the time?" I'm like, "All right, I understand whatever your thoughts are on Eminem, but like these kids are trying to have a positive experience, and you are just ruining this for them, and just ruin the energy of the set all the time." She took credit for ideas that weren't hers. She never thanked anybody for hard work. She just made everything miserable. And then by the time the ending of it all came about, I was a production manager on this project. We had the ending of the script was the burning of the cabin. And I went to the university system and said, "Hey, we want to burn down a cabin." They said, "Absolutely fucking not. Like that sounds terrible. You will never get this approved." And I said, all right, what are the chances I can get this approved? They said around less than 10%. I'm like, cool, bet. So I went to the local fire department. I asked, would you set this thing on fire, then put it out? They said, yes, we'll use it as a training exercise because they were all volunteer fighter fighters. I went to the landowners that we were building the cabin on. I said, like, can I have signed express permission to film? They had a massive plot of land. When I say massive, they have an actual airplane runway that they can land planes on. Like, that's how big it is. I went to my school teacher. I said, hey, can I get you to sign off on this? He's like, great. I went to them, and then they said, wow, you actually have a chance of getting this approved. After a week, they said it was approved by the entire university system of New Hampshire. I was able to get it approved. We burned it down. Went really, really well. The film, on the other hand, the final product was probably the one of the worst pieces of shit I've ever been a part of, and it was awful. Our director was like, "Oh, we're gonna put it in film festivals." Every one of the crew looked at dead in the eye and said, "If you're gonna put this in film festivals, take all of our names off of it. We want
Oh
no
my
part of it."
God.
Like, this was terrible. And even when we premiered it at the school, she stopped me from talking about the fire, about how I got that accomplished, and just took it as her own idea in front of everybody. And and I was just like, and then she was like, "Are you mad at me for something?" I'm like at this point, there's no reason for me to explode on you because it's too late. I chose my time too late, and I should have said something a long time ago. Even funnier, the next year, going into my senior year, I told a freshman about this, and I gave him the film, and they said that the rumor of how bad this film spread throughout the college campus, that the freshmen wanted to buy it from me. It ended up becoming like a pseudo, like Tommy Wiseau's The Room of the freshman class of the film studies program, and they were super ecstatic to get this film to watch because they thought it was so bad, and it was terrible.
So it was like legendary in how painful this is.
Legendary how painful it is. Like, I truly, like, the greatest lesson I got from that is everything I needed to do that. Like, I learned all the wrong lessons, and I think I learned what not to do for my next year for my own thesis project.
That's definitely something that has come up before, is like, we've spoken to other filmmakers, and one of the gifts that you are given by being on sets like this is that you learn what not to do. There's so much of there's so many mistakes that you could potentially make, but it's so much easier to watch someone make them so that you recognize, like, oh yeah, no, I probably shouldn't do that.
That's exactly what happened. I learned a lot of great lessons of what not to do, and whatever she did as a director, I did the opposite, and it worked a lot better for me, I would say.
Yeah, it really goes
Yeah, I
to
can
show how
definitely see
much
that.
the energy that you're putting out impacts everyone around you in the final product. And I mean, especially working with kids, I mean, you have to create a positive environment for them to be able to thrive and do good work. I mean, someone being angry and hostile, I just can't even imagine, especially on a set with kids.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was a terrible time, and I felt bad for those kids. I felt bad for all the crew, and we just had to deal with this tyrant of a director that put in no work. That the script wasn't even hers. She didn't care about anything, and I am like, I just hope she never works in the industry because I'm like, people will hate you, and that's like, because it's just the attitude. Like, I've worked with plenty of people that, like, hey, they started off a little bit rough, but they turned around because they learned lessons. She did not, and it was terrible. It was absolutely a terrible time.
It doesn't matter how good your ideas are if you're gonna act like that. It just makes it harder for everyone to do their job and to get to a good result at the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I am, like, so curious because I am a huge Tommy Wiseau The Room fan. I love terrible movies, but there's something about a movie that makes it terrible but enjoyable to watch. Would you consider this movie that you guys made terrible but enjoyable to watch because of how terrible it was?
Probably, like, from an outside perspective, from somebody that wasn't a part of the production, I bet you can find the greatest enjoyment of how bad this movie is. But for me, it is like I just hear gunfire and helicopters in the back of my mind. Like, it's all I hear is Vietnam. I'm like, this was one of the worst times of my life working on this movie, and it was just absolutely just devastating. And like, I probably woke up in like panic sweats sometimes because I knew I had to go on set with this director, and I'm like, I can't believe she even got the job. I'm like, she knew nothing about this script. And I'm like, I don't know what the choice was behind the department that said yes to her, but hey, she may have had a good pitch. I don't know. Wasn't in the room, but boy, was that a mistake.
Sounds like you're
I
still scarred.
Very
Yeah.
much, very much. It's like I still, it's good lessons to take, especially when, like, I moved on to my own projects. I just took lessons from this. I'm like, all right, now I worked with, it's just an absolute asshat of a human being, and now I just know to not. I tried not to be that person in any way.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, I mean, again, lessons were learned on this set apparently, but maybe not for the director. One would hope, but it kind of sounds like maybe not. And in that same vein, uh, I heard that you also do like some media management, and you've kind of been in the middle of a kerfuffle. It sounds like, if that's the right term.
Yes. In one instance, I was on set. It was a very low key little TV show. Like, like not. I bet the like the main person you've heard of, but they weren't there. And while we were on the show, I started offloading a card. I was just about to start offloading a card, and then the cameraman across from me talked to his second camera and said, "Look at this." And he found an application for his job the next day on set. And he's like, "They're going to fucking replace us. That's what they're doing." And he immediately stopped working. He came up to me and said, "Have you offloaded that card yet?" I'm like, "No, I was just about to." He's like, "Can I have it back, please?" Because they were his cards. They were his physical cards. He takes the card. I'm like, "Okay." And I give him back. He gets on the phone and he goes to the producer on set saying, "I know what you're fucking doing. You're replacing me. And now I'm going to hold this footage hostage until you give me not only today's rate, but tomorrow's rate in advance, whether I work or not." And that standoff lasted about 2.5 hours. The guy, I could see him go in his car. He starts, like, you can see, you can't hear what he's saying, but you can definitely tell what he's saying. There's a lot of swearing, a lot of fucks, and that, and it was probably one of the most surreal things. I'm like, oh my god, there's a hostage situation on with this footage on set. Like, the whole production came to a grinding halt in that moment, and the producer took us all to lunch and let this guy talk to the executives. And she's at lunch like, "This has never happened. I've been a field producer for 10 years. Nothing like this has ever happened to me." She was so stressed. I felt so bad. She's nothing that she did. Like, she didn't put out the application. She's just doing her job locally. And it's just, she's absolutely having a meltdown trying to figure out how to go about this situation. And we go back after an hour lunch, and the guy's still on the phone, just screaming at these executives. They're like, "No, no, no, we didn't try to replace you. That's for a different production." He's like, "You guys are so full of shit. It's the same name. It's the same production. It's the same show. It's all the equipment that you need from me that I have. And you think I'm stupid?" And the guy is just going off, and like, it went on for 3 hours.
Are you guys laughing? Are you like worried? Like, what's your
It
guys'
was
reaction?
at first we were worried, but after 3 hours, like, do we laugh? I don't know. Like, this was just like, it was just a surreal thing. You think you've never seen something like this. I've been a part of like almost 200 episodes of television. I've never seen something like this before, and still haven't. That was the only time.
That's wild.
It ended up getting resolved. The guy, he ended up getting a full day's pay for the next day. And I don't know. I wasn't on the next day for the show, but I have a feeling he probably wasn't on it, but he got paid for it nonetheless. So he ended up winning the war. But all I heard was the executive producer across. He was probably living in LA, saying, "Why the fuck did you let this guy use his own cards? I can't believe you let this happen." Like, the producers blamed her, the field producer, for this. I'm like,
Oh, that's not
this is,
fair.
yeah, they completely rammed her over on the phone call, saying like, don't ever let that happen again." I'm like, that's not her fault. Like, I know you're mad that you guys fucked up and lied and are bad liars, but you blamed a very innocent woman for your mistake.
Well, just like in general, I mean, this is kind of an interesting thing to think about, is like, who owns the footage? I mean, yeah, they're on his cards, but like the actual footage, the metadata, the data, like, that should technically belong to the production. So it really shouldn't be. Oh, wait, sorry. I'm getting a note from our producer. The law is whoever pressed the record button owns the footage at that point. So,
And they all rented his equipment too, and especially, but because the cards physically belonged to him, I think that's the loophole. Whereas,
yeah,
like, if the moment that happened, they switched all the cards out to the production company's cards. So if that happened, they would have owned the footage, but they didn't. So
right.
that was their biggest, yeah, like, that was their biggest
Oh my
oops.
god. That's
It's rough.
crazy. That had to be really interesting as that was all going down.
I'm not, I like, for me, like, I thought it was incredibly interesting, but I wasn't sweating because I knew like nothing was going to happen to me. All I do was offload the cards. That's all I offload the media. That's all I do. But just watching this from afar, it felt like it felt like like a student fighting a teacher in a cafeteria. You're like, you don't ever see that. That doesn't happen, And it was one of those moments of my life where I'm like, I am willing to bet I'll never see this again. But wow, like I went home, talked to my girlfriend about it, and even she's not even a freelancer. She couldn't believe it.
That's crazy.
Like it's a hostage situation.
It is a hostage
It was a
situation.
hostage situation. It was insane.
I will say that, as an editor, a lot of times, or when I ran a production company in the Bay Area, I would hold the final files hostage until I got paid from clients, because otherwise you're chasing down clients for 6 months, a year, and they don't pay you. So I did find if you're like, okay, you get the final deliverables when that payment comes through, you tend to get paid. But
Yeah,
it's
you
a
do.
little bit different than holding up an entire production on set.
Yeah, and it was not a great time. I'm not gonna lie, but it was one of those things that I kind of look back on. I'm like, hey, even though what I think this guy, he absolutely flipped out, and he actually regretted the way he said he handled the situation because he got very heated. But I was on his side completely. Like this guy, like he was being replaced on his own set. Like he found out he was being replaced in the middle of the day, and I'm like, I kind of understand, but I was like, wow, it was a crazy way to react to this situation, but like he ended up winning. So I guess, like lessons were learned that day on both sides.
I bet. I imagine so. So you've had some wild stories so far, from animals to kids to crazy people on set. You want to talk a little bit about have you done any filming outside of the continental U.S. and what kind of challenges came with that?
Oh yes. There was in the past couple of years, I was very privileged to work on a TV show that I had never thought I'd be able to work on. We filmed in multiple locations across. Yeah, like I'm trying to be very vague about this, just because it's a very sensitive issue.
You can't
But
give away the name of the production. Okay.
can't give away the
Yeah.
name of the production,
Fair
but we
enough.
filmed we filmed in we filmed in another country, and I was very jazzed to be there. I'm like, this is so cool. I feel very privileged to work on this. I really liked the crew. I thought it was really amazing. We land. I'll kind of speed through a part of this because like everything that could have gone, if 10 things could have gone wrong, 17 things went wrong. This is that type of production. Probably one of my worst weeks of production I've ever had. The production lasted 6 days. We were in this country. We landed 2 hours in. The car rental agency gave away our cars, all the production cars that we had reserved. So we had to spend an extra hour getting that. Our hotel was about an hour and a half away. We start getting on the road. This is great. All of a sudden, we're about to go over a giant one-way bridge, and traffic comes to an immediate halt. And we're like, some asshole is parked in the middle of the bridge, and so and now everyone's freaking out, like, what just happened? The local is running up and down the road, and we roll down the window, and we're like, hey, what's happening here? He's like, so someone got out of the car, and just put it in park, and then proceeded to jump off the bridge.
No.
This is my first 3 hours in this production. First 3 hours in this production. So we had to wait for probably 25 minutes for all the cars to get backed up to remove this individual's car. Yeah, and then we went on our merry way to the hotel.
You
Yeah,
guys
so
got
that was
a warm welcome to this country.
very warm welcome. Then it just, God, like what can I say next about it? Like we were filming in jungles. We were filming in almost every piece of land, just every different type of territory you can think of. And one of them, a production manager and I were walking back to a car. This is our first day. This is our first official day filming. He got too close to the edge of a ravine. The dirt came out from under his foot, and he almost fell off a 30-foot drop into a ravine. He was able to catch himself, and I caught him, pulled him back up. We get back to the car, and I can tell he's a little bit, he's a little bit shaken. I'm like, hey man, are you okay? Like, as I know that was a big thing that happens. He just turns to me without missing a beat. He just says, James, if that ever happens to me again, just let me die. That was
What?
that was his immediate reaction. For the 6 days that we were there,
Everyone is suicidal at this
it
point.
was so bad. For every day that I was there, I worked 18 hours a day on this production. When we went to lunch, when we put up Google, we would go to order lunch. We would show up. It doesn't exist. The place we went to doesn't even exist. That happened a multitude of times across this country we were in.
Wait, what do you mean? Like it wasn't on the map or what?
It was on the map. It just wasn't there on the map. It was 3 hours in the opposite direction on the map. No matter Google or Apple Maps had nothing correct where everything was. Is because also this place that we were in gets devastated by hurricanes on a daily basis. And I would say on a seasonal basis. But because of that, nothing apparently, like places get destroyed all the time. So then every time we planned on going somewhere, places just wouldn't exist no matter where we go. And we actually started to have a little thing where if we were driving and we saw a rogue chicken and a rogue dog, we knew we were lost. Like, because everywhere we went, we knew we had no idea. No addresses worked. And after this whole week, anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And it was just an absolute nightmare of a production. And afterwards, I came home and I don't think I spoke the entire night. I was just so distraught of how absolutely insane this was, and and especially when just like when you get there and nothing works and nothing happens, and it was just terrible, and it was just one of those memories that even though burnt marshmallows was my Vietnam, this was like I just felt like I got on deployment. It was weird. It was just really weird. It was very devastating.
I mean, things in other countries definitely usually aren't as convenient or as smooth and as easy when you're traveling, but this sounds like it was like a whole nother level.
Everybody there was having a terrible time. We ended up getting all the footage we needed to, but it was to hell and back. It was hell or high water. It was nothing good came out of that. And the rest of the production went very well, but just that one instance, I'm like, oh, I never want to come back here, because I just have terrible memories of everything of just everything that happened. And then everyone got so stressed. We were all just stressed out to each other. And like, we were like, cool, I never want to see anybody from this production until the next thing. Like, I never want to talk to anybody. This is just terrible.
Oh my gosh. What were you doing on the set again?
I was a production assistant. It was something that like, I was very like, I got to do all the grunt work. And that was part of what happened when, they'd ask you, to do things, day and night, no matter what, because just because the filming we had was so time sensitive that if we didn't get these certain tasks on time and on point, the entire day was ruined. And even actually one guy, this was a really, I wouldn't say super scary moment, but it was one of those that like, just another thing. We show up to the cliff sides of a beach. It was beautiful. It was like, wow, this is the first time something has gone right. We're at a beautiful location. Everyone's having a good time. We pulled a coconut off the tree, stabbed a hole. We were drinking fresh coconut water, like just fresh coconut. Like, how can anything go wrong?
Sounds amazing.
Our set medic goes over to this guy, gives him a COVID test, gives him, this questions there and there. 5 minutes later, over the walkie, we hear, get away from this guy right now. He just popped positive for COVID.
Oh no.
Whole day was ruined. No, whole segment out the window. And like, the guy wasn't even sick. He was like, he was asymptomatic. He had no idea he had COVID.
Is this like a guy selling coconut water or someone part of the crew?
So someone part of the crew, because he was a man that we had hired as a professional in his field, that he was going to go over certain things of his work. And so he got there, positive, whole day was ruined. Whole segment. They because of that, they had to the production company had to fly back 2 weeks later to film the segment, because it left such a gaping hole in the episode that it was going to be on.
COVID threw a wrench in so many things. Little moments like that. Oh my God.
It really did. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it sounds like because you were a PA, you probably felt a lot more of the friction of working in this kind of environment where things are just going wrong. As a PA, you have to be like so resourceful, but apparently when you're living in a place or you're working in a place that is quite literally not on a map, like I can't imagine how hard that must have been.
Yeah, it was difficult. Plus, I didn't speak the language, the native language of the country. I did not speak. We hired a local, but we worked 12-hour days. He was only hired to work an 8-hour day. So for 4 hours of the day, I was completely on my own, and I had to be very careful of when I had to get certain things done because weirdly, when we would go to we went to a Subway to get breakfast for everybody. Because our crew was a bit large, we had 12 people. We said, "Can we need 12 sandwiches?" They flat out said no. They didn't
Why?
want to make you the food.
It was
This
too
was
many
too much
They
work.
would make
sandwiches?
12
It was too,
sandwiches.
it was too much work. They said no, we're not going to make it. And then I'm like, I told our translator and our PA guy, he was a very nice gentleman. I'm like, can they do this? He's like, yeah, they're going to try. And he said something in Spanish, but I imagine the words he said were make the fucking sandwiches. That's pretty much what he said to me afterwards because they're like, apparently you can just refuse work where that is. And I'm like, yeah, no, we need to feed our crew, and you're the only place that's open because it's 4 in the morning.
Because it's
Oh my
oh
gosh.
my god.
It's 4 in the morning.
Like,
You're the
can
only
you
place
just
that's
give
open.
me the meat? Just give me the bread. I'll make the fucking
Yeah.
sandwiches.
Yeah, it was. I'm like Jesus, like, and it's every place. There was probably only two restaurants we went to that we had a good experience at. Everything else was like they just refused to do it. And I'm like, why are you refusing a lot of money? I don't understand. And I'm like, I get it's early in the morning, but good God, it was. I'm like, what else? You really say like, what else can go wrong? And then it did.
That's stressful. People
Murphy's
start getting
Murphy's
hungry. At
Law.
least I know I get real hangry and I like my brain shuts down. So you got to get people fed.
Yeah, and not a lot of the crew were not fans because not only was I ordering food, I was ordering lunch the previous day for them to eat. And like so, the food was sitting there for 18 hours, and they were expected to enjoy that food. They did not, and they blamed me. I understand why they blamed me for that, but I'm like, I just a PA. You tell me to jump, and I say how high. That's what a PA does. PAs make no decisions. The PAs are just told what to do, and they're like, I understand why you guys are upset, but that's it. Like it is what it is.
Hope no one took it out on you.
Oh, they did.
They
Someone did.
did?
It's okay though. I've had worse days on set than that. But I would say like even though that was one of the worst weeks that I've had, the crew was still very nice. It was just the moments of frustration. I don't blame anybody because we had to go through a lot, and I bet I had my moments as well. But they were very nice people.
How did the show turn out at the end of the day?
It was good. I still haven't watched it. I'm like I was there. I know what happened, But I would say it got very positive reception, and hopefully they pick it up for another season.
Is that typical for you? Do you tend to watch the final result of the productions you're involved in, or are you usually so over it that you don't want to see it?
I'm not gonna lie. As long as the money's in my account afterwards, I don't much care to watch some of the stuff I've been a part of. Like I think it's really cool. Some of the stuff I'm like, oh, I'd like to see my name at the end of the credits just to see where it all goes. But overall, I'm like, no, I'm trying to work on my next thing. I'm trying to worry about getting like my next project made and trying to do that. And it's I so no, I usually don't watch my own stuff unless it's very interesting. My family does more than I do.
Fair enough.
It's understandable. I mean, speaking from like an editor's perspective, and Taylor, I'm sure you experienced this too, but you're just like, I've seen it. I've seen so many versions of this. Like, I don't need to sit through it one more time. And especially when it's a traumatic experience being on set, I'm sure it's a little bit like watching burnt marshmallows where you're just like, no,
Like
please
I
make
was
it
there.
stop.
I knew what happened.
Well, I think we've kind of reached the end of our time. Is there anything else that you would want to add on to this as far as either stories or something that you're working on that you'd like to tell us more about?
Sure. I actually recently had just completed production on a short film that I had wrote and directed, and it's called "We Need to Talk." And we're currently now going into full post production, and yeah, now we're trying to promote the film anywhere we can. You can find it on Instagram at "We Need to Talk" underscore film, and then my own personal is James underscore Calnan underscore the third, three capital I's.
Very nice. I look forward to seeing this film.
Yeah, it was a good labor of love. A lot of it was it's a no budget film. I just wrote like a little 20 pager. I started asking people about like, hey, would you want to be a part of this? Or like, yeah, this is a great script. Let's do it. And I'm like, oh, cool, and I just kept getting yeses. And then all of a sudden, I cast an actor from New York. I cast an actor from Maine. I cast an actor in Massachusetts. I got there's a director of photography that I am that I've worked closely with, and we are all like, yeah, like we can do this in a couple of days, and we ended up doing it, and it was a rousing success so far, and it was one of those things like, wow, I never thought I'd get this far with this project, and now it's all done, and now I just can't wait to show it to the world once it's all set.
Well, we can't wait to see it. Please do send it to us when it's done.
Absolutely, thank you. I will.
Well, James, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. You've had some pretty wild stories, pretty unbelievable at times. But yeah, so let's wrap it at that. That's it for Shoot the Shit. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a great time.
Join us for the next shit show.
Subscribe here for the full version of this episode.
And remember, when it gets tough on set, it makes for a great story after.
No Longer Network.